Welcome to the Roland Garros preview show, where I analyze and take you guys through the Roland Garros draw after it came out on Thursday. I'm so excited for this week's episode. From now on, I'm going to be uploading an episode every 2 weeks, and I think just the quality of the episodes will be so much better. So yeah. Welcome, tennis fans, to Tennis Traverse, Exploring the Game, the podcast that delves into the heart of the tennis world. I'm your host, Ivy Zhang, and in today's episode, I will be analyzing the women's singles and men's singles Roland Garros draw. So let's get right into today's episode. I want to start off with the women's draw because I think, even though I said beforehand that really this draw this year is open, in a way that I think for both the women's and the men's, everyone really who's ranked in the top 10, let's say, have a chance of winning or just being in the mix. And to cite in the mix, which is a phrase used by the tennis podcast, I'll link to tennis podcast prediction as well. I think in the mix means that players who have a chance at winning, and if they won Roland Garros, you won't be surprised. And I think beforehand I thought that the mix was going to be just really open, everyone can be in the mix, but with Jannik Sinner coming back, I still think that the women's mix contain more players than the men's mix. So that's why I want to talk about the women's first, because I think there's just overall more to talk about. So I want to start by saying the first, a few, overall thoughts about the draw. The first one being it's top heavy, because a lot of the great players are positioned in the top half, and I think that will benefit the players positioned in the second half, such as Coco Gauff or Andreeva, because there's not that many sort of, you could say, players that could challenge them, I guess. And that's also, I think, just better for players in the second draw who maybe aren't ranked as high, because they just have less competition overall. And that's basically just my main thought going into this draw. If you guys want to follow along, I have a newsletter that basically now it's not bi-weekly, but it's every other week. It's going to be uploaded to my Substack on Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern time, and by the time my episode comes out on Monday, you guys would already receive a PDF versions of both the women's and the men's single draw with my analysis on it. Because this is going to be just a podcast episode, I don't think I can talk about everything I analyzed, but the draw analysis PDF is just really, really specific. And if you guys subscribe to my newsletter, which is linked in the show notes, you guys can just follow along on your phone, on your iPad, wherever you want to follow along while I break down the draw. I think it'll be much simpler. There's star matchups that I highlighted, potential upset matches that I highlighted, as well as just some top seeds and some interesting matchups in future rounds, as well as just every round's prediction, which I think I went over the top for on this. I think you guys will really enjoy if you are an avid tennis fan. Yeah, but if you guys have the PDF, please pull it up now and we can just get right into the women's draw. So let's start with the first half of the women's draw, or the first quarter of the first half. The first quarter of the entire draw. So we have the number 1 seed Aryna Sabalenka and the number 8th seed Zheng Qingwen leading this pack. And I just want to highlight some of the star matchups that is going to be in this round, especially in round 1. So I highlighted the match between Peyton Stearns and Eva Lees. If you guys can follow along, you can see there's a star next to it. And that means that I think this will be an interesting match. I think coming into this, Peyton Stearns have been just performing really well. She's been playing amazing sets of tennis. She won consecutive tie breaks in the deciding set after parting ways with her coach Tom Hill. And I think that coaching change, whether it's just a abrupt change or that she just found like a great coach for her, I think it really manifested through her performance. She's been performing really well, and I think before her coaching change, she's known for playing these really tight matches and even challenging some top players like Sabalenka, but she just almost never comes through from that. I think she always is just like comes up a little bit short. But just from her run previously in Rome and in Madrid, I think she's sort of finding her footing a little bit, and just like playing these incredibly tight 3-set matches is really beneficial for her, I think, because she needs to get the confidence in her that she's able to beat these players. So for example, in Rome, she beat, for example, Svitolina in the deciding set tiebreak, Naomi Osaka, and Madison Keys as well, and she ultimately lost in the semifinal. But I think this run is extremely like beneficial for her, and it really, I think, prepares her well for Roland Garros. Her opponent, Eva Lees, I think is just someone I really like. I really enjoy how she approaches tennis, her just mindset overall, and I think this is a really good draw for her in a way to match up against Peyton Stearns, who I don't think a lot of people will expect her to come through, because she likes to play as like an underdog. For example, in Australia, she came into the tournament as a lucky loser, but she made it to the 4th round, and I think that just shows she's used to playing with like her arms loose and not caring about the results. And I think that match with Peyton Stearns will really make her be like, okay, I'm the underdog here, and she's going to just swing her racket and just hit the ball. And I think that's really going to be a great matchup, although I will say that her past results haven't been so great. For example, in Madrid, she lost to Pegula in the 2nd round. She lost to Rybakina in Rome. And in Strasbourg, she lost to Xingyu Wang. But to be completely honest, I think Pegula and Rybakina are above a level compared to Peyton Stearns. So I think Eva Lees have a chance of beating Stearns. So I think this will be a really fascinating matchup. But regardless, I have Stearns coming through. We'll talk about another star matchup and then we'll move on. I want to talk about the matchup between Leila Fernandez and Olga Denilovich. I actually have a symbol next to this match, and I think it will be an upset. Fernandez is the number 27th seed, whereas Denilovich is unseeded. But I think just from their recent performance and how they perform in like bigger tournaments, I do think Denilovich will win, because she went to the final in Open de Rune, and she's been playing just like, I think overall pretty good. I believe she went really far in Australia. I think just overall, she went to the 4th round in Australia and she beat like Pegula along the way, and I think she's not scared of Leila Fernandez. On the other hand, Fernandez hasn't been having, I would say, the best results. So yeah, I believe, like for example, she lost to Diane Perry in Strasbourg, and in Rome she lost to Marta Kostyuk. So I think Leila will fall short, and I really think Denilovich will pull through. And then let's talk about the second quarter. So the second quarter, we have Jasmine Paolini, the number 4th seed, and Iga Swiatek, the number 5th seed. And I feel like it's really unfamiliar to see Iga being the number 5th seed, because she normally just lingers between number 1 and number 2. But just after the Olympics, after Roland Garros last year, she hasn't reached a single final, which is just really unlike her, because she's known for just completely dominating her opponents. But I think she's still in the mix for me, because it's Iga on clay. It's sort of the same thing. Obviously, you can't equate these two just because of how much more Rafa have. But it's like when Rafa plays on clay, you just sort of have to believe that he will win a match. And that's the same thing for Iga, especially at Roland Garros. I know that her performance in Rome and Madrid weren't great. She lost to Danielle Collins, she lost to Coco Gauff. But, I mean, I think this is a really interesting matchup. Okay, so speaking of Iga, I do want to talk about her draw because I think it's not a good draw at all. So I have her first round opponent will be Sharapova, who normally if she's like playing great, I don't think she will struggle against. But with her form now, I think her draw isn't really kind to her. And then for the second round, she'll likely play against Emma Raducanu, who has been playing great and she's been taking it like a step at a time, which if she's locked in, I think she really do have a chance of challenging Iga. And then Kotsiuk, also third round opponent, not an easy opponent at all. And then moving on to the fourth round, I think she will either get Rybakina or Ostapenko, which like Ostapenko is just her goal in life is to beat Iga. And with Roland Garros, which is Iga's best major, and she's completely dominant there, I'm just like wondering if the matchup with Ostapenko will win or her like just like form at Roland Garros, like which one will come out on top. And in my case, in case of Rybakina, I think Rybakina will also challenge Iga, even though Rybakina hasn't been in her top form at all. So I still have Ostapenko beating Rybakina, and then Iga losing to Ostapenko. I think Iga is a little bit in a stage of denial where she thinks that nothing major is wrong, and in her press conference, she appeared normal, but we can tell that she really wants to win this Grand Slam just because I think she really needs a title really badly. And Roland Garros, in a way, it wouldn't necessarily be the tournament that may get her out of a rut because she's won Roland Garros for 3 years in a row. However, I think this is her best chance of winning a major title this year. Regardless, I think just from her form, I think Ostapenko is still going to come out on top. And then some star matchups of this round, I have Anastasia Potapova beating Noskova. I think that will be really interesting, and I think it will be upset because Potapova is just playing better, I think, than Noskova. I checked their recent records, but that's about it. I think there are a lot of great matchups later on. For example, we might have Paolini versus Potapova, Vekic versus Garcia, Svitolina versus Vekic, Rybakina versus Ostapenko. There are a lot of great players this quarter, which takes me to my the players you guys should look out for in this quarter. So I have Vekic, Garcia, Svitolina, Rybakina, and Ostapenko. So I think Vekic, just from her form at Roland Garros and just from how she performed in the Olympics, I think she really do have a chance of challenging a lot of players. I think she's going to come out, and her match against Garcia will be an interesting one. The reason why I highlighted Garcia is because she's retiring after French Open, and I think there definitely will be some sort of ceremony for her. But just I think this match will be really great because Garcia is fighting to potentially play her last match of her career, and Vekic is just always a fighter out there, so I think this will be a great match. Svitolina too, she's been in top form, I think, even though her last tournament in Rome hasn't been the greatest, but she's just been playing great tennis on clay. For example, in Rome, even though she only made it to the quarterfinal, which is obviously already a great result, in Madrid, she made it to the semifinal. In Open de Rune, she won that tournament. So I think she's one of those players that is really consistent in the tournaments like before French Open. So really curious to see how she's going to do in France. I mean, I have her losing to Paolini in the quarterfinals, which I think in the fourth round, which might be a likely result. But to be honest, I don't want to underestimate Jasmine Paolini because she did win Rome, and I think she's one of the most informed players going in. But I think Paolini's draw is also pretty tough. I mean, from the third round, she might have Potapova, and then Svitolina or Vekic. And then she's going to have to face the winners of either Swiatek, Ostapenko, Rybakina, or maybe even Kotyuk in the quarterfinals. So I think that will be tough. Yeah, and that's basically it for this quarter. Now for the top half, I want to talk about the quarterfinalists. So I believe Sabalenka will come through. Even though her draw is a little bit tough, I think she's going to just come through just because she's Sabalenka and she has such a positive mindset. And I have a bold prediction for her opponent. I think Stearns is going to beat Zhang. Obviously, Zhang I think played great in Rome because she beat Sabalenka, but I don't think that meant too much because Sabalenka, I don't think she was physically there or mentally there. I think she just played that tournament to prepare, but I think she was a little bit drained. Even though I think that obviously will boost Zhang's morale, I don't think that damaged Sabalenka at all. But Zhang just hasn't been playing great because her match against Coco Gauff was just so scrappy. And I think Stearns, just with her overall mindset and just her with a fighting attitude, I think she's going to come out on top. And then Samsonova also went to the final in Strasbourg, I believe. But I think Stearns is going to come out on top. Stearns versus Sabalenka. I have Sabalenka coming out on top. So that's going to be our first semifinalist. And then for the next quarterfinal matchup, I have Paolini versus Ostapenko. I mean, this might change. It might be, I think if Iga beats Ostapenko or Rybakina, she's going to beat Paolini. I think Paolini just have a matchup issue against Iga because I think it's just how Iga hits the ball that Paolini find it hard to handle a little. However, I honestly don't know because Paolini is in much greater, better form than Iga. However, I think regardless, Sabalenka is going to beat Paolini or Iga. So in my draw, I have Paolini going to the semifinal and the semifinal matchup between Sabalenka and Paolini, and I have Sabalenka coming out on top. But if it's Sabalenka versus Iga Swiatek, I still have Sabalenka coming out on top. So for the first half, I have Sabalenka coming out on top, and she is our first finalist. And yeah, okay, now we'll take a little break. That is a lot. And we'll move on to the bottom half of the women's draw. Okay, everyone, welcome back. I know this episode is going to be a long one, but just hang with me because it's Roland Garros and there's just so much to talk about. For the third quarter, we have our number 6 seed, Mira Andreeva, and our number 3rd seed, Jessica Pegula, leading. So now we're down to the bottom half, and I think you guys can just if you guys have the draw PDF open, you can see that there's just less highlighted matches. I mean, I think first round matchups, there's more interesting matchups, but then after that, I think it's just more overall weaker compared to the top half. So we'll just talk about some star matchups in the first round of the third quarter. So I have Daria Kasatkina versus Katerina Siniakova and Naomi Osaka versus Paula Badosa highlighted. Obviously there's a lot more, but I'm just going to talk about these two. If you guys want to see the other ones, subscribe to our newsletter. I have Daria Kasatkina coming through, but I think Siniakova, just from how great of a doubles player she is, and sometimes if she's on, I do think she have a chance of beating Kasatkina, because I don't think Kasatkina has been playing great in Rome or Madrid. The other match, the one I really want to talk about, is between Naomi Osaka and Paula Badosa. So I think I'm a little bit biased, obviously, because I love Naomi, but I think Naomi is going to come through. The reason is because Paula has been injured and she hasn't been playing a lot of matches. She's been withdrawing. But on the other hand, Naomi, she just won a 125 title. She's been playing pretty good. Even though she lost in the first round of Madrid, she went pretty far in Rome, and she lost in a deciding tiebreak to Peyton Stearns. So I think she is slightly the favorite here. And just like, let's follow Naomi's journey. If she beats Paula Badosa, I think her journey is like pretty much open after, like, until the fourth round, because she's then going to probably play against Mira Andreeva, which would not be an easy match for her at all. And in fact, I have Andreeva coming out on top for that match. But I think, let's say if she beats Badosa, she has to play against Kessler and then Kasatkina, who I think is not in great form, and then Andreeva. So I really think just overall the draw on this side is just much more open. There's less like challenging opponents, if that makes any sense. And then talk about potential upsets. I have Ons Jabeur beating Magdalena Frech, because I mean, I was surprised that Draper wasn't even seeded. I mean, obviously she had to deal with a lot of injuries, but I thought she would be at least seeded. However, I do think this will be a great match, because I mean, I think Jabeur is going to come out on top, so I do have an upset in this quarter. And then, yeah. Okay, that's basically it. I mean, I think Andreeva and Pegula are going to both come out on top. I know Pegula hasn't been performing great, but if you really look at her draw, there really isn't that many players who can challenge her. The only one I could think about is Jabeur, but still, I think Pegula is going to come out on top. And then for the fourth quarter, we have Madison Keys, the number 7th seed, and Coco Gauff, the number 2nd seed. Okay, so I think this quarter is kind of, I'm sorry to say, boring, because we really don't have that many great matchups. I guess I'll just follow the journey. I think even though there isn't many great matchups, the one thing is I think Gauff have a relatively easy draw. And I think the draw is really kind to her, because she's playing against Olivia Gadecki in the first round, and then playing against Paquette or Valentova, and then Erika Andreeva or Kalinskaya, Alexandrova or Kudermetova or Krejcikova, but I mean, she hasn't been playing tennis at all. And then we have Gauff versus Keys. Obviously, I think Keys and Gauff have relatively easy draws, but between Gauff and Keys, I mean, I think Gauff is going to win. But obviously, I don't want to underestimate Madison Keys, because she had that incredible run in Australia. And I think just coming in, a lot of people don't expect her to win. And I think I would be surprised if she wins as well. That's why I have Coco Gauff coming out on top. But that's basically it. Like, I don't think there's that much to talk about in this half. I just have the 4 top seeds in this quarter going into the quarterfinals. So between Andreeva and Pegula, obviously I have Andreeva coming out on top. Pegula just hasn't been in the great form recently. But I think just overall, I think Andreeva is going to come out on top. And then Keys versus Gauff, this I talked about, will be an interesting match. I think both of these players will not be challenged too much before reaching the quarterfinals. But I think this match, it really just depends a lot also on the conditions and on Coco Gauff's form, because I think Gauff is a player where she could be performing incredibly well, her forehand and her serve both on, and then it could just suddenly falter and it could just completely turn the match 180. So I have Gauff winning because I believe in her form, and she did make it to the final of Rome where Madison Keys didn't, and Madison Keys hasn't been having the greatest results on clay, even though she did make it to the semifinals of Roland Garros in previous years. I think Gauff made it to the final, so I think Gauff have an upper hand. And between Gauff and Andreeva, I think I had Gauff winning just like from experience wise. I think Gauff just have more experience overall, and they played, I think, in Madrid, I believe. Wait, let me see. I think they played in Rome, and Gauff won in 2 straight sets, and it wasn't too like straightforward set. She won 6-4 and then 7-6, 7-5 in the tiebreak. So I think this will be interesting, but I do have Coco Gauff coming out on top. Okay, so our finalists for the 2025 French Open Women's Singles Tournament will be between Sabalenka and Coco Gauff. And before looking at this draw, I would favor Sabalenka to win because I think she's just in better form and she's absolutely the favorite. However, after looking at the draw, I think Sabalenka will have a harder time reaching the final just because her half is much more competitive. And I think that really changed my opinion on who is going to win. Because I know Coco Gauff is someone that can fight. Like, if she's not playing, maybe she doesn't have her forehand or her backhand or her serve on, she's still able to fight against a player who maybe isn't having the best day, and she'll normally come out on top. And obviously I think maybe another way to look at this is Sabalenka will be so prepared because of all the hard matches she had to play that Coco Gauff will just be like, obviously she's going to be probably her toughest opponent, but she's going to have more experience. But Gauff hasn't played against that many great players, and she maybe hasn't been like, she didn't need her form to be that great to beat them. But I still think just from how exhausting Grand Slams are and just from like playing match day after day after day, I think Gauff is going to come out on top just because I think her matches reaching the final will be much easier, but I think it'll be a close final, and I think Gauff will win in 3. So yeah, please let me know what you guys think of my predictions in the comments down below if you agree or disagree. And I'm really happy to look at all of your comments and see and just like respond, and we can have a really good tennis discussion. So yeah, please tell me what you think about Gauff winning in 3. Okay, that's all for the women's draw. We'll take another break and we'll move on to the men's draw. Hi everyone, welcome back. So now let's talk about the men's draw, and if you have my newsletter, please close the women's draw and you can open the ATP draw. So we're gonna basically do the same thing. So let's get right into it. For the first quarter, we have the number 1 seed Jannik Sinner and the number 5th seed Jack Draper leading. And the star matchup I want to talk about is Hubert Hurkacz versus Joao Fonseca and Arthur Fils versus Nicolas Jarry. So I want to talk about Hubert Hurkacz versus Joao Fonseca because I think a lot of people will think that Joao will really use this as a good opportunity to propel himself, sort of like how in Australia he used Rublev to just like get into form. However, I think this is not going to be the case because Hubert Hurkacz has been playing fantastic tennis recently. He's currently playing in Geneva against Novak Djokovic in the final, and they split sets, and now it's 5-6 with him serving. So I will update you guys, I think, at the end of this episode because I think the result of that will come out. But I think this will be a good match. I think it will be a 5-setter most likely. But I think Hubert Hurkacz is going to come out on top because he's just in better form compared to Fonseca, who has been just not playing that great. Okay, and then I want to talk about Arthur Fils and Nicolas Jarry because Arthur Fils hasn't won a single match in French Open. And that's really weird because he's our number one Frenchman this year to look at. And I just think that's overall a really interesting thing because I really do think he have a chance of going really far, even challenging players like Sinner, because Sinner has just come out of a ban, and I think in Rome too, his physicality of just being on a tennis court will just falter because he hasn't had that much practice. And I think Nicolas Jarry will be a little bit of a challenge for him to just like get him into form, because I don't think he's won a single straight 3-set like match in the Grand Slam. Regardless, I do think this will be a close match, and not a close match, right? Regardless, I think Fils is going to come out on top. And then I think his bigger challenges will be in the third round, where he might play against Andre Rublev. I think Rublev obviously hasn't been playing great, but Rublev do have a chance of challenging Arthur Fils. I think they both have like sort of a similar playing style in a way that they both pour a lot of emotion into playing tennis, and I think that really just make them sort of like a same type of player because they're both emotionally invested. But Fils has just been in better form, so I do have him coming out on top. And then his match against Jannik Sinner, I thought more about it. At first I thought it was going to be a straightforward Jannik Sinner win, but then I thought more about it, and I really do think it's going to be a close match because Jannik Sinner has just come back from a 3-month ban. And Arthur Fils, I think the French crowd is going to cheer for him a lot because he is the number one Frenchman for like French people. I don't know. So I think it's going to be a close match. And if Arthur Fils can make it to the fourth round where he plays against Sinner, I mean, he's never played on the biggest Roland Garros court, Philippe Chatrier. However, I think if he does, I don't know, I feel like he's a player that's made for the moment. Like, I think he is the player that's going to be like, I'm ready for this moment, but I don't know how much the pressure is going to get to him. In my opinion, it's going to, like, he's going to rise up to the occasion, but I'm really looking forward to that match. Yeah, and then as I said, I want to talk about Hurkacz a little bit too. I think Hurkacz and Monfils, even though they both like basically peaked at different times this season, I think Monfils peaked beforehand, but Hurkacz has been playing well recently. But regardless, I think both of these players have a chance of going far. I have Monfils going to the second round, losing to Draper, but I mean, if Draper isn't on, I don't think Monfils will, like, I feel like if Monfils, just like from the energy of the crowd, I think he have a chance of challenging Draper. But if Draper is on, I don't think this matchup will be an issue for him, but it's a match that I think is really interesting, and you guys should check it out for sure. Hurkacz, he might play against Draper in the third round. And speaking of Draper, I made a bold prediction, and this was pretty bold. I think he's going to be one of our finalists. I know like a lot of people will be like, why? But I just think even if he plays against Jannik Sinner, he's had more experience and more success this year, and his match against Jannik Sinner, obviously, I don't know how well his body is going to hold up in a best of 5, but same with Jannik Sinner. And I think just from more experience this year, Jack Draper is going to come out on top. I think the match will be quite similar to the one Jannik Sinner played against Carlos Alcaraz, where he's just physically not there. But at the same time, I do see a possibility of him playing great, like how he played against Casper Ruud, where he just completely destroyed him. Regardless, I think it's going to be more of the first case. I think Jannik Sinner will just falter a little bit physically, because he said in his press conference that he's surprised about how far he went in Rome. And I think French Open is a completely different case, because it's best of 3, and it's best of 5, and overall it's just more intense. So I think Jannik Sinner is just going to be not as well physically prepared compared to Jack Draper, who I think is really methodical with how he plans out his schedule. He knows that his physicality maybe isn't there. Sometimes he's working on his physical, just doing a lot of physical work. And when he's tired, he knows to not play a tournament and to withdraw. And I think from just doing that at such a young age, it's really going to benefit him in the future. So yeah, it's a bold prediction, but I do have Jack Draper coming out in this quarter. And then for the second quarter, we have the number 3 seed Alexander Zverev and the number 6 seed Novak Djokovic leading. I think this half, it's like a kind draw in my opinion for Djokovic, because Zverev is not playing great at all. I would be surprised if he's gonna win Roland Garros. But for some star matchups, for example, I have the first round match with Zverev. I have Alexander Zverev against Leonard Tien. I think Zverev will figure out a way to beat Tien, but Tien is such a smart player and he knows how to play around players like Zverev. Although I think Zverev will just matchup wise, he is better compared to Tien. However, I do think it will be a challenge for Zverev, and I have him losing in the third round against Arnaldi. I think Arnaldi has been playing great. He beat Novak Djokovic. And to be completely honest, I think even if Zverev beat Arnaldi, his next round opponent will be most likely Cerundolo. And I don't think that's a matchup he wants to face at all. So I have Zverev losing to Arnaldi, and I will be really surprised if he can come through to even the quarterfinals. Okay, and then the other matchup I want to talk about is Felix Auger-Aliassime versus Matteo Arnaldi. And I have this as an upset match because I do think Felix FAA has just not been playing great, and Arnaldi has been, as I said previously, playing incredible. So I do have him coming out on top against FAA, and after he comes out on top, I think his biggest sort of challenge will be against Zverev, and then after beating Zverev, his match against Cerundolo will also be a great one. I think Cerundolo is such a clay court specialist, and sort of a similar tone with Sebastian Baez, even though Baez haven't been playing great and Cerundolo has been playing better. That's why I have him going further than Baez. I think Cerundolo is going to do pretty well in this tournament. And then I also want to talk about Medvedev, because I think Medvedev has been playing better than his the hard court period. I think also because the expectations on hard court is much higher than him playing on clay. He's just more relaxed, and I think that's really beneficial to him. Obviously, his fall off is really dramatic if you compare him 4 years ago to how he is now. He has really just been not playing that great, but I low-key think he's been playing good clay tournaments. I know he won that tournament on clay, and that was his last, I think, tournament title, but I think he's getting better on clay. And the really interesting, and I think ironically, if he beats Djokovic in the fourth round, that would be really, really funny. But regardless, I have Djokovic coming through. I mean, Medvedev's first round opponent is Cameron Norrie, and I mean, I could be completely wrong, and Norrie could just beat him, because Norrie did, I think, go to deciding set with Djokovic. But between Djokovic and Cerundolo, I think Djokovic is going to come out on top. And also, I do want to say the Geneva result come out, and Djokovic did win that 100th title. So congrats to him, and I think that's going to give him a big confidence boost coming in. And he's just been I mean, just like full credit to him, because I feel like in Rome and Madrid, well, he didn't even play Rome. In Madrid, he lost really early on, and for him to come back, part ways with Andy Murray, and then win a title, that's pretty impressive. And I'm just curious to see how much he carries that into French Open. But I have, for this semifinal, I have Djokovic versus Draper, and I have actually Draper coming on top. But with that win in Geneva, I'm not really sure. I think Djokovic might come out on top. But regardless, I think this quarter is also a really interesting quarter. And we'll take a break and we'll move on to the next half of the men's draw. Okay, hi everyone, welcome back. I think this is going to be my longest episode yet. I'm really excited. I think just because I'm recording every 2 weeks now, it's going to be more episodes like these, just longer overall. But let's talk about the men's draw for the second half. So for the second half, I mean, I think, as I said before, I thought it was going to be, there's like a lot of players who might have a chance at winning this, but I think it's just the top seeds who really have a chance. So for the second half, I really don't have anyone highlighted that aren't top seeds who you guys should look out for, but I'm just going to talk about the third quarter first. So we have the number 8th seed, Lorenzo Musetti, and the number 4th seed, Taylor Fritz, leading, and I have a star matchup, which is between Frances Tiafoe versus Roman Safiullin. I thought about making this as an upset because both of these players just haven't been performing well recently. But regardless, I still had Tiafoe coming through because I think, I just think he's going to come out on top. But there are a lot of potential second round matches. So I think the match between Opelka and Nakashima will be a great one. Opelka had an amazing start to the season, and I think just like in general, big servers like Mpechi Pericard or Opelka, they struggle on clay because their serve just isn't a big weapon on clay courts, because the clay court basically eat up the ball speed, and they have to rely more on their ground stroke shots. So that's why I think both Opelka and Mpechi Pericard has not been performing as good as they were on hard courts. But I think Opelka versus Nakashima will be a close match. I think it will be likely a 5-setter, and it will be just an entertaining watch. And then I have Mahac and Baez. Both of these players, sort of a similar tone. They have not been performing well. But I think just Mahac can't finish a match. I don't know why. I think he has so much talent in him, but he always withdraw, and sometimes he literally will withdraw after going down 2-5, and he just doesn't want to stand one more game. Obviously, part of it have to be physical, but I think a lot of it also have to do with his mental state. I think he's a little bit immature sometimes, and that's going to affect his results. But I think just like he has to not withdraw and go through like some of these losses, because these losses are a way for you to mature and just get better at tennis. And I think just him refusing to maybe go through some losses and just being like, okay, I'm just going to withdraw instead of playing it out is actually what's holding him back. I think he really needs to go through some of these losses, and after losing them, to maybe analyze and break down what happened which caused him to lose. Okay. And then I also have, I want to talk about the match between Baltic Fernandez and Holger Rune. I feel like Holger Rune is like the perfect opponent for Baltic Fernandez to beat. I don't know, like Baltic just beating Carlos Alcaraz at US Open, beating Holger Rune. I don't know, like he has something about him, and I think just even though Holger did win a title, I just think it's a really interesting match. I do have Rune coming through just because he's just like on paper better, but you know how Baltic operates. He doesn't play a player who's like, if he plays a player that's ranked lower than him, he might lose. But if he plays against a player that's ranked higher than him, he makes it his mission to beat them, and he just has no facial expression whatsoever. And I think Holger-Rune is a player that Baltic might see as an opportunity to make an upset. So despite having Holger-Rune to come through, I think if Baltic beats Holger, it will be a really, really funny thing. Okay, that's it. And then for this quarter, I have Musetti and Fritz coming through, with Musetti ultimately winning. I think Fritz has just been dealing with a lot of injuries, and I think especially his third round match, which I have starred, Fritz versus Mikkelsen. I think Mikkelsen have a chance. I don't think Korda Tiafoe will have a chance, but I think Mikkelsen really do have a chance because he beat Tsitsipas in Australia, and he's not afraid of these big moments, whereas Korda might be. I think Mikkelsen really lean into playing these big names and just enjoys being an underdog. So yeah, but I think this draw is relatively kind to Musetti and Fritz. I think both of these players have relatively kind draws, and I think they'll have no problems pulling through. And I also think that's the same thing with Casper Ruud and Alcaraz. I guess if you really think about it, the bottom half of the men's draw is also weaker compared to the top half, but for the last quarter, we have the number 7th seed Casper Ruud and the number 2nd seed Carlos Alcaraz. And some star matchups I want to talk about is Ben Shelton versus Lorenzo Sonego and Thomas Martin Etcheverry versus Stefanos Tsitsipas. I'm going to start with the Tsitsipas match first. I do think this will be really close because Tsitsipas is known for losing early in Grand Slams. He's just not performing well in Grand Slams for almost his entire career, like maybe except for that French Open final run. I think this will be close, but I don't know. He's sort of in a similar position with Zverev because they're both a little bit in denial with how, Tsitsipas is saying that the game of tennis has changed and that's why he's not performing well. But Zverev is saying that he's just finding excuses. He's saying that he has like illnesses, whatever, and he's always like just putting the blame away from him. I think Tsitsipas acknowledged both that he's not been performing well and the game has changed. So I think he's in a better position, and I think mentally he needs to be in an even better position to maybe improve his game more. I mean, he made some changes. He changed his racket, which did help him, and I thought that after that title he's going to do really well. He's going to completely stand out, but that didn't happen. However, I think the match between Etcheverry is less of a trouble player than Cerundolo, so I think Tsitsipas will have a little bit of a challenge in first round, but I think he's going to pull through. Ben Shelton versus Sonego, I don't know. Ben Shelton, he's probably going to beat Sonego, but I think he's going to lose to Tsitsipas in the third round. But between Tsitsipas and Alcaraz, I think Alcaraz is going to come through. But I do want to talk about Alcaraz's draw because if you compare Alcaraz's draw to Sinner's draw is much more challenging. He has to play against Gasquet, Lehechka, or Davidovich Fokina, Arthur Fils or Rublev, Mensik or Draper, and then the entire quarter, like the other quarter, which contains Novak Djokovic, Cerundolo, like Zverev, Arnaldi, like a lot of great players. But for Alcaraz, I don't think there's that many like great players in his quarter. Obviously, we have Casper Ruud, who just won the biggest title of his career, but he got completely destroyed by Jannik Sinner. And we also have players like Tsitsipas, who, if it was before, maybe it was like 3 or 4 years ago, we'll be like, oh my god, that is a challenging match for Alcaraz. But now it's like, okay, I think Alcaraz is going to come through pretty easily. And then I mean, that's about it. I don't think anyone here could really challenge Carlos, but like a match I do want to talk about is Carlos Alcaraz versus Morozan, who have beaten him before. This is a second round match, and I think Carlos is known for playing his way like playing better in form like throughout this tournament, if that makes any sense. Like he might start off the tournament a little bit patchy and he gets better as the tournament goes on. But like, I don't know. I think that match will be a difficult one, especially if it's at night, because he hates playing night matches. And I don't know, because I feel like Morozin really can challenge Carlos Alcaraz. It might be a really close match, but just from the way Alcaraz is performing, I think he's going to come out on top. And between Ruud and Alcaraz for the quarterfinal, I think Alcaraz is going to come out on top. Okay, now let's talk about our 4 quarterfinals. Between Sinner and Draper, I think Draper is going to come out on top. I already talked about that. Cerundolo and Djokovic, I mean, Djokovic, I think, is going to come out on top. He's been playing great. Even though I wouldn't say that like 10 minutes ago, but he just won Geneva. And Geneva is his 100th title. And I don't know how much he's going to carry that form into this tournament, because although he did beat players like Arnoldi, like Hubert Hurkacz, like Cameron Norrie, they're like a completely, I think, different caliber compared to, like, for example, Jack Draper, or even, let's say, Cerundolo, if he's on. And however, I do think Djokovic is going to come through. But between Djokovic and Draper, I do think Draper will have the upper hand, and I have him as our first finalist. For the second half, I have Musetti versus Fritz. I think Musetti is going to come out on top. Fritz has just been dealing with a lot of injuries this year, and he, for example, in Australia, he's been showing just like promising form, but maybe it's just because his opponent is too weak, and then once he plays against a player that's a little bit better, he just completely breaks down. That's what happened when he played against Monfils in Australia. So I'm not sure, but he will be playing against some pretty tough players. He will be playing against Mikkelsen, for example, Korda or Tiafoe, before facing Musetti. But I think Musetti is still going to come out on top just because he is a really talented clay court player. Our last quarterfinal, I think I have Casper Ruud versus Alcaraz. Casper Ruud's road to the quarterfinal will be easy. I think the biggest challenge he will be against Paul or Kachanov. However, I think he's a better clay court player than both of them. And for Alcaraz, as I said, I think his biggest challenge is actually going to be Fabian Morozin, just because he plays himself into form. And when he's in form, I don't think Tsitsipas, Shelton, or Pericott can challenge him at all. So I think Alcaraz is still going to come out on top. Alcaraz versus Ruud, I'm going to back Alcaraz any day. I mean, Ruud, I will give him a better chance now compared to him before winning Madrid, but I think Alcaraz, I mean, come on, like, he's, spoiler alert, he's my champion. I think between Carlos Alcaraz and Musetti, Carlos Alcaraz is going to come out on top. But I do see a little bit of a challenge here. I think Musetti have a chance of beating Alcaraz, but just from the way Alcaraz won that Rome title, the way he played in the second set, I think he's going to beat Musetti. So our final will be between Carlos Alcaraz versus Jack Draper, and I think it'll be a fairly straightforward final, but I think Jack Draper is going to give him a little bit of a hard time. So I have Carlos Alcaraz winning in 4. Okay, I honestly don't know how I feel about the men's prediction. I feel better about the women's prediction. I think that will be more accurate. Watch me just get them both wrong, but I think the women's prediction is more accurate because I don't know. I took a chance. I think Sinner is not going to go really far. I think he's going to lose to Jack Draper. And I don't know. This is just my opinion. Again, disclaimer, my opinion. But feel free to talk about it in the chat and just talk about it. If you're listening on YouTube, leave a comment. Listening on Spotify, also leave a comment. Yeah, okay. I think that's all for today's episode. I know this is a big one. It's 54 minutes. This is my longest episode yet. But it's one of my favorite episodes ever to film because we're getting ever so close to another Grand Slam. Thank you so much for listening. If you guys haven't subscribed to my social medias, you should. I think I'll be more active because I'm basically done with a lot of my schoolwork. So I'm going to try to be more active. Please follow me on social media, that is Instagram and Twitter, using @TennisTraverse, that is @TennisTraverse. If you're listening on YouTube, comment, like, and subscribe. If you're listening on other streaming platforms, please rate my show. And I guess I'll see you guys next week, where we talk about the aftermath of Roland Garros. That's actually insane. Oh my god. So by the time you guys listen to my episode 2 weeks from now, you guys will learn who the champion is and see if my predictions are right or not. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Bye.